And good morning. Welcome to Loyalty Leaders Insights. I'm David Feldman. I'm chair of the Loyalty Summit, and we're joined by four fantastic guests this week. This week, we're going to be talking about the loyalty impact of the US airlines dropping change fees, and also American Airlines overhauling their basic economy product. Obviously, of great interest to people in the US. For people outside the US, sometimes a bit of confusion about what all this means. We're going to deal with all of that. Let's get straight into introducing our fantastic guests. We have Gary Leff from View from the Wing. We have Seth Miller from PaxEx.Aero. Jay Sorensen, who's the president of IdeaWorks Company, and Dina Zach, who's the director of revenue pricing consultant. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. But I thought what I'd do is maybe we could kind of go around the room, so to speak, give a quick introduction, but also give us your quick 60-second hot take on what we've seen in terms of your immediate reaction for US airlines dropping change fees. Seth, you're an upstanding gentleman. I'm going to start with you.
Hi, Seth Miller from PaxEx.Aero, longtime listener, second-time caller. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me again. And my hot take on this is I think that from a loyalty perspective, we haven't really seen the impact yet. The most loyal of the customers aren't the ones necessarily flying right now. And until we get them back sort of in the air, we aren't going to know. But ultimately, I think that I actually expect a slightly negative impact against that. I think it helps break loyalty a little bit, but potentially also you end up with more revenue on a broader base.
Thank you, Seth. Who would like to go next? I'll pick Jay.
Lucky me. Hi, I'm Jay Sorensen, the president of IdeaWorks Company, and we are an airline consulting firm that works with airlines all over the world on the topics of retail improvement, ancillary revenue generation, and frequent flyer developing and improving frequent flyer programs. I think this is a good move by the airlines. I think it's an incomplete move. I think that not dropping change fees for all fare categories, mainly exempting basic economy from it is a mistake.
Okay.
And more about that.
I'm gonna probe your thoughts a bit more on that, Jay. Hey, that's a great quick take. Thank you very much, Gary.
Right. So the major issue here is that change fees are no longer the way that airlines segment customers. It used to be that you needed 21 or 14-day advance purchase, Saturday night stay, change fee to deliver who is a leisure customer at a low fare or a business customer at a high fare. Basic economy is how the airlines are doing that now. So the two changes and issues are very much linked. The challenge with respect to loyalty, though, is on the one hand, customers at American Airlines, at least, are going to be treated basically the same anytime they walk into the airport. They can still use their benefits once they're identified as an elite, but the airline has decided that only those customers who are paying for the higher fare are the ones whose loyalty is valuable in terms of generating that status.
And I think we're definitely going to spend a few minutes today talking about that, because I think that is we've already sort of highlighted in the topic headline for today, but Americans' changes to the way they're even approaching basic economy. It's a huge pivot from where we were. So Gary, I'm going to come back to you on that, and let's explore that a bit further. And last but not least, Dina, and your specialty is revenue management.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Dina. First time joining the Loyalty Summit. I'm a revenue management expert, usually. And my big take on this is not to mention the C word, but the airlines have introduced, and by C I mean COVID, the airlines have definitely introduced this because they are struggling to generate passenger traffic. And it's to give the ability to customers to book with confidence. So I see this more as trying to generate the market to start moving again. More than a loyalty play, but they're also trying to grab share because they're fishing in a very small pool. If you look at other parts of the world, we have a lot of quarantine regulations with other countries. So all they're trying to do is grab share and allow customers to book with confidence. So if you can't travel for any reason or your plans change, you're not penalized financially.
Yeah, It's an interesting point, isn't it? In terms of, we can't look. We don't want to be talking about the current situation going on, every day, every year, and it doesn't dominate 100% of strategic decisions the companies are making, but it can't be ignored either. There is a reality of what's going on right now, which segments of customers are traveling versus not traveling. So, I think that is an important overlay that we always have to, keep in the back of our mind, or even in the forefront, when both analyzing what's going on in the industry, but as programs and as brands making those decisions that might normally seem short-term tactical, but actually, maybe even the definition of short-term is a question there. So let's focus in on the change fee aspect. I want to put basic economy just to the side for a second here. I know it's not completely unlinkable, but let's focus on change fees. Jay, you are your specialty is fares, bundled fares, unbundled fares, ancillary revenue, a la carte pricing. When we think about change fees, and I know you mentioned, your quick take on it. But if we think back a few years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, in terms of the way airlines have approached design of fares, and particularly trying to fence off different groups of customers, how do you see that evolution? Is this a revolutionary change with them dropping change fees? Is this back to the future? Is this a step change? Can you sort of give us a bit of a context of that?
I think Gary pointed out something very, very wise, and that is, back in the 70s, 79, when the U.S. industry was deregulated, we began to have a tremendous amount of low fare new entrants pop into the U.S. market in the 80s. And the big change occurred, I think, when American introduced, I think it was 86, introduced Ultimate Super Savers. And prior to this, change fees were not, they were there, they were modest, and they weren't punitive. And at the point that American Airlines introduced Ultimate Super Savers, they did it to try to match, to play in the same sandbox with the low cost, with the new entrant carriers. And I'm certain that what happened, because I was at an airline at that point, and what happened at our airline is that, okay, we can match these fares, but we are going to put a fence around them and to make them unattractive to business travelers. And if you were a business traveler and you bought this Ultimate Super Saver, we made sure that you really regretted that decision if you were going to change the reservations, which business travelers are prone to do. So over the course of time, these change fees became a method of segregating business travelers from accessing those fares. And then it just became a very lucrative source of revenue for airlines. And so they have gone down for the last couple of decades, just really boosting these and enjoying, as we can see from the DOT reports, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue on an annual basis from these change fees. I don't want to say it's a crack cocaine, but it certainly is something that has become an important component of an airline's revenue pie.
Jay, Seth, if I could toss a question back at you. I know there are definitely hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in that ancillary markets, but it also has seemed to be that change fees has become a shrinking part of that, as opposed to bag fees and other sort of more new sort of development and newer ancillary fees becoming the way that the airlines are growing that ancillary market, as opposed to just more and more people taking changes. And part of that is because in many cases, change fees are more expensive than the replacement ticket or than the original ticket from some of the airlines. So it's cheaper to throw it away and buy a new one than to change it.
Yeah.
But do you see that is shifting where the change fee argument is coming from, and that is actually a shrinking market a little bit?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to write the definition of ancillary revenue. And when I wrote it, I came off working for an airline where I was director of at one point, director of pricing. And I hated change fees because I had to be the enforcer of this. And so when I wrote the definition of ancillary revenue, I wrote change fees out of it. So all the stats that you see from IdeaWorks company regarding ancillary revenue, we make every attempt to carve out change fee activity from the airline disclosures. So, and I debate that on a regular basis. We carved it out because it really is a component of the fare. It traditionally has not been something that the customer could choose. Right now, we're seeing a change in that with branded fares, we're beginning to see that some of the fares are flexible so that the consumer actually can have a choice in terms of how much flexibility they're going to pay for. And so I've been told by airline people that when they introduce branded fares and one of them has a component that offers flexibility, complaints about changes drop dramatically because the consumer is faced with the choice up front. Hey, what do you want to accept in terms of your relationship, your contractual relationship with the airline for this transportation?
So Dina, over to you.
I was just going to add to that to say Jay is absolutely right that most of the airlines I've worked with on the balance sheet, change and cancellation penalties or even booking deposits don't come into ancillary revenue. They go into another place on the balance sheet. Even cruise is similar. So it sits in another pot. But I think it's airlines just knowing what the consumer wants and recognizing it a little more right now.
So, Dina's on that. I mean, if we think about and just kind of recognizing all the comments that everyone's made so far, I mean, change fees really were one of the mechanisms that airlines have used and, outside the US continue to do. I mean, at the CAPA, Australian Aviation Summit last week, both His Excellency and Alan Joyce from Qantas, both made very clear change fees aren't going anywhere. I mean, and Alan Joyce made the point that, look, change fees are an integral part of the way revenue management is designed, the whole revenue management model. And outside of the short-term 2020 waiver of change fees, outside of the current circumstances, he doesn't foresee a world where change fees are going anywhere. In his words to paraphrase, you take change fees away, the whole revenue management model breaks down. Now, just like United saying that these changes are permanent forever, that's the situation today. He's certainly entitled to change his opinion tomorrow. And other airlines around the world may have a paradigm shift, going forward as well. If they see an advantage or a benefit of a new approach to revenue management. But up until now, Dinaz, the whole reason this is an integral part of revenue management is to fence off and segment business consumers separate from leisure customers. Leisure customers are typically more price sensitive. Business corporate travelers are typically less price sensitive, and as we've already discussed, are prone to change their plans at the last minute. Therefore, it's an opportunity not to penalize them by being punitive with charging them change fees, but to encourage them to buy fully flexible fares in the first place, which obviously generates more revenue for the airline. It makes sense. I think everybody intuitively understands this concept, even your once-a-year flyer. Mm-hmm. Does the whole model break down by removing change fees now? I'm interested in sort of where you sit on this, given this is your wheelhouse.
Okay, so I think if the model is to break down, right now is the best time for it to break down, is where I'm coming from, because all the history, all the data, all the demand, and the way people are canceling bookings is way off scale. It breaks down for a particular amount of time until machine learns the new system and the new way of doing things. Typically, you would say it would take a year because every month has different demand patterns and stuff like that. So in the short term, and revenue managers are going to hate this all over the world, any change to the data system is huge, or them being able to use data with confidence goes against the grain. So they will have to maybe make some manual interventions in the meantime until the model starts to learn from what's going on in the world. But also, they will start to overbook more, because if you The other reason why change fees were there and in place is to avoid the churn of bookings. If people keep changing their flights and moving around, and it depends on how close they do this to departure, it becomes very difficult for the airline to resell that seat. So the big thing is going to be them starting to overbook a little more and more cleverly. There's two types of overbooking. One is the cancellations. They overbook against cancellations. And the second part is no shows on the day. So the two kind of go hand in hand, but not quite. And then some airlines now have started allowing standbys as well on the day to go to moving to earlier flights. So all of that is going to change the cancellation and no-show rates for airlines.
So just while I've got you here, let's just delve into a little bit. Over the weekend, I picked up the phone and had a chat with a few revenue managers, US and outside the US, just to get their kind of quick take. And if I can kind of paraphrase them into sort of one response, and that is that they all pretty much said that their view of this change is it's the ultimate sign that United, American, and Delta, and the others that followed, but also the others like Alaska, don't believe in any good recovery trajectory of business travel in the short to medium term. If they did think that business travel was going to bounce back anytime soon, they wouldn't be giving up this fencing against the downsell that change fees and flexible fares provided. In regard to the high value corporate travel segment, at least in regards to domestic travel. The general consensus opinion from everybody I spoke to is that this is going to be a huge travel for revenue optimization and revenue management guys, and it's going to cause a few headaches. Given what you've said about with the data, and it takes some time, there is a lag. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, absolutely. And the recovery is going to take much longer. But what I find interesting is that this getting rid of change fees has been made permanent by some airlines in the US. Other airlines still have some fences around that. So they are sitting on the fence, if you like, for a while until they're sure. And some are doing it in stages. So they've got it up to end of September. Some have until end of December. Some have into next year. So everyone's playing a slightly different game. And that might depend on their business model and their technology that they have at their disposal as well, probably.
Gary, I want to come to you in a second to talk about custom segments in terms of who's flying right now. So just to give you a quick heads up to maybe put your thoughts together on that. A reminder to everybody, we do have a chat feature as well. I see Peter's in there, some comments. Fantastic. Please feel free to comment, question. We'll certainly try to grab any questions that come up through the discussion as well. Jay, just before we turn to Gary, Southwest. Southwest really has established themselves as a player who's, they're their two biggest, I guess, brand attractions, at least in recent history. They're not so much a low-cost carrier they were decades ago, but certainly recent history, no change fees, no bag fees. If you were to sum up in one line what Southwest Airlines' marketing tactic or strategy or slogan is, that's it. How do you think this places them now?
That's interesting. When I have flown Southwest Airlines, I would like to hear the experience of my fellow panelists. I encounter as many carry-on bags on Southwest as I do any other airline. And so if their intention is one of the benefits of having bags fly free, I think it violates one rule of travel, and that is travelers love their carry-ons. And so I think working through a solution for carry-on bags is more important than having something policy regarding bags fly free. But yeah, in terms of their change fees, it does put Southwest at less of an advantage. But when I introduced myself, I put this teaser out there about, I think that the airlines, the big three, have made a mistake here. They have exempted basic economy. And so they're boxed into this horrible situation of saying, well, change fees are bad, and so therefore we're going to be a friend of the consumer, we're going to eliminate them. But apparently they're not bad enough to eliminate for all fare classes. And so I think that they made a mistake by not eliminating it across the board. It is similar to something like Walgreens, where Walgreens would say, you know what, we're going to stop selling cigarettes. but we're going to have a cigarette machine in the entrance of the store for those who want to buy them. It kind of violates the intent of the policy. And so I think we're going to see down the road, I think we're going to see a move by the majors to drop them from the basic economy component as well. And there's another element here that hasn't popped up in the conversation yet in terms of why this is happening. And these airlines want to get billions of dollars in support from the federal government. And that needs to happen very quickly in the next couple of months, in the next month in terms of the politics side of it. And so I suspect that a very significant contributing factor was to curry favor with politicians, with regulators, and with the public. And this was a very effective way to do that. And I would say that it has been a very effective, the outcome has been very effective for the airline industry in terms of people look at this as a really good thing.
If we drop the change fee from basic economy fares at that point, putting aside some of the changes American made that, backed off some of the restrictions on them, I feel like the no flexibility may have been even more poignant than no seat assignment until you get there and some of the other things. At that point, it almost feels like to me like we have to just drop basic economy as a concept.
Basic economy, I will offer is a mistake in that if you look in the booking path in terms of how it's presented, you have to click through a couple of boxes that says basically, this is a really terrible product. Are you sure?
But I want it anyways.
Buy it? And then you have another, are you sure, really, really, really sure you want to buy it? And it's like when a company has to go through that much pain to prevent someone from buying the wrong product, it's the wrong product.
It's the wrong merchandising, right? I mean, it was dubbed about 5 years ago originally with Delta as hate selling, right? But the concept is one where airlines, when they no longer have 7, 14, 21-day advance purchase requirements that they can maintain with low-cost carriers, when they no longer have Saturday stay requirements, round trip requirements, it's their last and newest effort to continue segmentation. So they need something. They can probably do a better job with their unbundled sales and customized sales to allow people to buy the things that they want, rather than offering an undesirable product that they market as bad. I don't think that it's a mistake to not remove change fees from these fares, to the extent that this is the only mechanism they really have to continue segmentation. They'd have to give up the entire segmentation idea. I do agree that it's sort of an inconsistent narrative to the point about Walgreens and cigarettes. It's the youngest, most leisure, infrequent travelers buying basic economy. So it's like Walgreens stopping the sale of cigarettes except to children. But in fact, they're doing it precisely because it widens the gap between the standard fare and the basic economy fare. So it reinforces that gating effect that they're trying to get, which means that we're often conflating the idea of actually what's happening in removing change fees. First of all, there's the forward-looking policy change about no more change fees for domestic non-basic economy fares, but that's really a 2021 phenomenon because, roughly speaking, for the rest of this year, the COVID waivers exist that apply internationally, apply to basic economy as well. So we want to unbundle a little bit the discussion of, what's going on with COVID and what's going on with the change fee waivers. And we shouldn't talk about it in terms of they're waiving change fees. We should talk about it in terms of change fees are waived on, some fares or, fares that aren't the least expensive fares. And then actually at that point, passengers may not like the idea as much. It also underscores that the benefit is not as great relative to Southwest as some observers might initially seem, because Southwest still offers the no change fees on their least expensive fares. And Southwest has other advantages that are new. The fact that they're not having to do furloughs means their per trip labor cost is likely to be lower rather than the higher direction that high furlough airlines are going to see with more senior crews. And so there's lots of things going on. I'm not feeling too badly for the competitive position that Southwest is going to be under. I'm also not sure that this does a tremendous amount for the overall political effort to get another payroll support bailout, because I mean the political support exists. It's trapped in whether or not an overall deal happens for a new CARES Act 2, additional round of stimulus, etc. Right, and I mean if it does, there's not a whole lot of political objection, regardless of whether or not it's a good idea to do. So it's not like they needed just to overcome too many senators against it, right? In fact, the biggest thing that they've been able to do, American announcing pulling out of small cities, that 28 different senators happen without this, as well as several who are on the House Transportation Committee. So I think this really is a forward-looking decision about how they're going to segment customers in the future.
Gary, in terms of, who's traveling now, I mean, when we think about very oversimplistic terms, we think about business travelers versus leisure travelers, the reality is that we have these simple stereotypes or heuristics in our mind. But the problem is things are a lot more complex than that. For example, we think about, managed corporate travelers are all flying up front, in the business or the first class cabin. We think that, leisure travelers are the only ones buying, the cheapest fare of the day, perhaps even advance purchase 2 months in advance. The reality is there's plenty of business travelers, both managed and unmanaged, down the back of the bus, and there's plenty of leisure travelers that are up the front, all buying above, fares that are, they might buy economy fares that are above the cheapest fare of the day. I don't necessarily want to specifically say basic economy, but they might be buying a more premium economy cabin or main cabin fare. There's a mix. The problem is that there's always a mix, and those stereotypes are never simplistic. But right now, we have a lot of information about who's flying and who's not flying. And, I know you spent a lot of time covering this, and Seth as well. And I know that we've all been, talking for months about the fact that business travel isn't coming back anytime soon, and predictions or fingers crossed hopes that it suddenly is going to bounce back, and history's, I hate to say it, has proven us right. Unfortunately, the recovery is very elusive right now, and that's a struggle. It's a bad thing. We're not rooting for that, but we have to be realistic about who is flying right now. Vasu Raja at American has been really forthcoming with a lot of, he's new Scott Kirby at American. Everyone loves him because he talks, and he candidly tells you the state of the world. Investors love that, love that from airlines. Well, he's revealed a lot of really interesting information, such as over summer, 85% of the customers that they've been having have actually been buying basic economy. Now I'm not sure if that means that they like basic economy, but to me, my takeaway from that is 85% of the customers that have been buying tickets have been leisure customers buying the cheapest fare that's on offer. And given that the hotspot for flying has been Florida, and that happens to also be one of the most popular routes to find cheap basic economy fares on, even in normal times, that all seems to make a lot of sense to me. But
I think part of that is also that, I was just to add on to that, part of that is when the ticket is cheap enough, it's disposable, right? So in addition to the fact that all these waivers exist right now, and this sort of goes back to something I was talking about earlier with the fares changing, like if I have to throw away a $75 or $100 ticket, sure, I'm upset about that, but compared to having to throw away a $300 ticket or pay $200 in new money to get my $300 of value out on a change or something like that, as someone who travels more often, I certainly don't care. And if I'm someone who really say in mid-May or early June, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to take a summer vacation, I really can't tell if I'm going to have a job, if I'm going to have my unemployment benefits, if I'm going to have somewhere to go, if there's going to be anything to do with it. Maybe I'm willing to take that risk of, it was just $50, it was $80, whatever that price was for that cheap ticket. And I'm not worried about all those other things. And okay, it's basic economy. I'm not even sure I'm going. Do I care what seat I'm in? No. Do I care? Like all of those other little things matter a lot less, I feel like.
So, Gary, if I could just sort of focus your follow-up to this as well, hold that thought, but if you could just add on to it, I mean, in the context of what we just talked about, who's flying, who's not flying right now, I mean, we can't ignore that, right?
Well, so there's a couple of things about who's flying, and look to comments from Vasti Raja on this. It's not just that they're buying basic economy tickets. It is a disproportionately large number of people who are not members of the Advantage loyalty program, and that's true at other airlines as well. Over the summer, we saw an increasing proportion, although far less than usual. It's not as skewed as it was in May. But it is the once a year or less very infrequent travelers who are buying tickets. However, when they see their members who are normally business travelers buying, those travelers are buying leisure fares, because to your earlier point, Dave, it's not just that the models of business travelers aren't always right. It's that the business travelers and leisure travelers are often the same people. So they may be buying premium cabin tickets on long trips. They may be buying economy tickets on short trips. Their company might have a rule that says, say, 4 or 5 hours as a cutoff for buying that premium ticket, right? And so, you have the very frequent premium customer, both in the back and in the front for work, and frequent travelers are trip, and they may buy the least expensive ticket on the weekend. And one of the things that the American change does do in terms of change to the basic economy, it says that we are recognizing the elite member and the value to us. We're going to continue to recognize them with their benefits, even on that weekend trip where we don't think that they're giving us enough value to earn that status, but they've already earned it. So let's still give them the opportunity for the confirmed better seating, for even an upgrade if it's just with a single companion. And so it's treating that person more as a whole customer rather than just the individual ticket that they're buying, because I do think that it recognizes, as Raja has said, look, we need to deliver the product that the customers we have now are interested in buying, not just the product that we expect or want to sell at some future point when the customers we used to have come back, right? And so, and it's worth noting that, of course, that Advantage now actually does report up to Vasti Raja with the summer reorganization of executives at American.
So, we'll come back to that in a second, Gary. I'm going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors, but we shouldn't underestimate the impact on organizational culture that management reorganizations and reshuffles can have. That presents opportunity for an organization that is, airlines. Someone once likened airlines to me to be like an elephant. You want to get significant strategic change in direction at an airline. It can happen. It'll happen, but it's going to move very, 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 very slowly, and make sure you're not underfoot as that elephant's turning around. But we might be seeing a bit of a conflation of things between the crisis that airlines are facing this year that presents opportunity, management reshuffles, and you know what? When things are bad like this, sometimes you're going to get approval to try new things that you wouldn't necessarily have to try in the best of times. Very quickly, I just want to take a quick 60-second break to thank our sponsors of Loyalty Summit. Engaged People, Amia, Adara, fantastic sponsors. Thank you for your support. Also, Hilton Honors, who's our official venue partner for Loyalty Summit in the Americas, which will be coming back very soon. I'm going to tell you about that in just a moment. Radisson Rewards, who's our hotel and venue partner for Loyalty Summit in Europe as well. And Travel Data Daily, who's our media sponsor also. In terms of our next physical in-person Loyalty Summit, I know everybody is keen to get back together in the same room once it's safe to do so. We're pleased to announce Loyalty Summit Americas will be in Washington, D.C. at the Conrad, Washington, D.C. It's a fantastic property if you haven't been there. I'd encourage you to check it out, take a look at it. Everyone's going to be very excited about this. June 30, 2021, we're going to be back there in person. Keep an eye out on the website, loyaltysummit.com, for more information on that. But I know nobody wants to wait till June 30 next year, so we are going to be having something before the end of the year. We're going to have a very, 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 very big online conference. More details will be coming very soon, so please do stay tuned, both on LinkedIn and loyaltysummit.com for that. We're going to talk more about that. Also, a quick plug for the next Loyalty Leader Insight on September 29, which will be the same usual time. We're going to have Alan Elias and Len Laguna. We're going to be talking about rewarding your highest spending customers versus incremental revenue. What segmentation best practice? strategies to follow and to consider. So we're going to be talking about that, which I think would be a nice segue to some of the things we're talking about here today. And Gary, you segued into basic economy there, so let's sort of pivot slightly into there. Basic economy is a confusing concept for people, both in the US, outside of the US, people in the industry, leisure flyers. Basic economy was never about cheaper fares. The major carriers, United, American, Delta, were already matching fares on routes and markets with airlines such as Allegiant or Frontier or Spirit. But what they were finding was that people who were less price sensitive, such as business travelers or economy flyers who don't necessarily have to buy the best fare of the day, cheapest fare of the day, were saving money because on competitive routes, the fares were highly competitive. And airlines, when their load factors are very high and they're exercising capacity constraint, there's very little opportunities to grow revenue other than trying to squeeze more money out per passenger. So they used basic economy. They introduced basic economy as a means of, I know you used the term hate selling. Jay described the booking path, which basically said, are you sure you want to buy this basic economy fare? No, trust me, you don't want to buy this. This is a horrible, horrible, horrible fare. You'll be cursed for life if you buy this fare. Don't buy it. In other words, you want to fly on our plane from Dallas to Miami next Tuesday at 10 a.m., instead of paying $50, you need to pay $150 for a regular economy fare rather than basic economy. The whole point was to get business travelers or price-insensitive travelers not to buy the basic economy fare. And the strategy to a large degree is very successful in the sense of managed corporate contract customers in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases, were able to simply block basic economy from being shown in the purchase booking path through their corporate booking tools, which is exactly what the airlines wanted. Now, the airlines didn't complain when there was this misinformation in the public suggesting that there were these new cheaper fares out there. But, that's a sort of marketing or messaging nuance. But Gary, by taking away, one of the biggest things on that was for existing elite members, and let's just define that is somebody who is already an existing repeat customer who has already given you sufficient level of custom and business to qualify for elite status. The way the airlines did that was basically saying, if you're an elite customer and you buy basic economy fare, you're not getting any benefits. You're not getting upgrades. You're not getting seat selection, yada, yada, yada. American has completely pivoted on that and said, you know what? We're not going to impose that restriction anymore. If you're already qualified as an elite member, you've already proven to us that you can be loyal, you've given us your custom, you've met the spending requirements over the period of the year, whatever fare you fly on, whatever day of the week it is, we're going to honor you as a loyal, recognized customer. I mean, that's a huge policy backflip and pivot, Gary, yes?
Oh, I mean, it certainly is. I mean, and to your point, United Airlines was actually argued that this was a new lower fare. American hadn't done that. They were very, very clear. They said that these were new attributes for their lowest fares, right? And this goes back to how do they segment customers so that they can continue to charge more to people willing to pay more and less to people that, that where they're picking up incremental business. It's the idea that Jay brought up earlier with Americans Super Savers in '77 and the Ultimate Super Savers that began in 1985. When they were fighting against low-cost carriers, what the airlines effectively realized was they could have no-cost carriers as a second airline because they had these extra seats that they could sell at a deep discount, and they could avoid selling the deep discount fares to the people who were paying high fares to the existing airline. That method broke down, and so they introduced basic economy as a way to try to reset or get more money from people willing to pay more, and it was done, I think, very badly. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with the then senior vice president of revenue management at American, who said that this was like crazy. You have a top tier elite who, for what you decide is worth loyalty benefits because of the business that they're giving you. You even now have revenue component to your elite status. You've said this is a good customer, and then because they buy a cheap fare on the weekend with their family, when their loyalty may even matter most to them, right? Because it's not like they'll take any indignity that you throw at them, but you treat their spouse poorly, and this is emotional. This is meaningful. This is like, let me take care of the people that I care about, and you decide that they're not worthy of the extra legroom seats, even that they've gotten used to. This is crazy, but they were trying something to regain their pricing power that they had largely lost because low-cost carriers were offering fares that were cheap at the last minute. So, one way, no advance purchase, and they needed to match those fares so that they wouldn't lose those customers, but they were offering those fares to people that would have paid much more, and so they were losing the higher revenue and leaking. So they introduced basic economy in a way that was basically done badly, and they have been changing the attributes of it ever since. Now, United is the most dedicated to the original model. They still ban full-size carry-ons as part of their basic economy. Something that that Scott Kirby developed at American and brought to United. American no longer does. So it's at United, if you've got if you don't have a check bag and you're on basic economy, you can't check in on the app because they don't believe you, and so you got to show someone in person that you don't have a bag to check or a full-size carry-on. But it's there's tremendous indignity at United. American has gradually relaxed these requirements, and they've gone instead to say, look, you're not going to, in addition to it being non-changeable, and you can still buy better seats, but if you have status, we're going to recognize your status, but you're not going to earn any of the credit towards your status. So if you value that, you're going to have to spend more. Whether or not that works is, remains to be seen. It's going to be an empirical question. It's likely not to be as extreme a situation as in 2002 when U.S. Airways first and when Delta looked at only honoring full fare tickets towards status. That wasn't sustainable, and certainly wasn't sustainable at the time. We're probably not going to get to that extreme. We're just talking about the buy-up, but the challenging thing is that buy-up sometimes is $20, $30 for the segment, and sometimes maybe $400 for the segment. And the reason being, what is the relevant they believe what is the relevant business fare in the market versus just extracting incrementally more from a leisure traveler to avoid those fares. And so the variance in the buy-up from basic economy is what's going to be interesting to see in terms of the consumer response. But you're right, for the most part, businesses have said that the people traveling for them aren't going to be required to travel on those fares, at least those who are in managed travel programs. And so that portion of it has been successful.
So, Dinaz, just before I come to you there, I mean, folks are still, there's a lot of folks that are still very confused. And Gary, thank you for that, kind of walk through an explanation. And I think it makes it a lot clearer. But we can really think about basic economy, or if you're an airline executive and you're considering basic economy, or you're looking at it, you're reviewing it, there's two strategies at play, and they kind of correlate to two segments. On one hand, you've got your existing elite members, your non-cheapest fare of the day, non-once-a-year flyers, your some level of repeat business customer. And you want to put some fencing or gating on your lowest fare so that they are encouraged to buy a fare above the lowest fare. Now, whether that is you don't get your existing elite benefits unless you buy up, or there's absolutely no flexibility. So perhaps the situation we have today, you pay change fees on the lowest fare, but the fares above that, change fees are waived. You want some sort of gating or fencing to encourage those that are less price sensitive to buy up to a higher fare. As Gary mentioned, restricting elite benefits to someone who's already an existing elite is punitive. It made no sense. It's contrary to everything we know about loyalty. And obviously this call is full of loyalty practitioners who are all, nodding their heads in furious agreement on that concept. But at the same time, I mean, Scott Kirby was very outspoken about this. And when he was American, he cited a similar figure at United at the time that roughly, I think it was, 87% of their customers fly once a year or less. but they were responsible for about 50% of the revenue pie. And his point was, you can't not match the low fares that are in the market by the ultra low cost carriers, because the simplest way to getting elites and managed corporate customers to pay more is just increase your fares, right? Don't offer those $35 fares to Miami, on spring break or over the weekend or whatever it might be. Make them $150 for everybody. Guess what? Everyone's paying $150. But his view was, when 87% of your customers are infrequent, non-repeat, cheapest fare of the day customers, it's a huge, you can't just ignore 50% of your revenue pipeline and say, we're not interested in those customers, which is an interesting position. But that was part of the logic behind, we have to match the fares, but we want to gate them. Given what Gary's sort of run through there, an American taking away those elite benefit restrictions away from basic economy, so that you've really only got the change fee now differentiation, at least currently, but also acknowledging that it wasn't just about elite benefits being restricted. Part of basic economy was, you can't change. Not for $1,000, not for $10,000. You cannot change your you cannot buy an upgrade. You, at least initially, you couldn't buy seat selection. Now, as Gary said, some of those things got kind of watered down and mixed a little bit, but it was never initially a traditional unbundled product like you think about when you think about low cost carriers. Now you've sort of had that turn on its head. I'm interested in your perspective on that. Is part of this a recognition that, if that segment, the infrequent, cheapest fare segment of the day, is such a huge portion, and according to Vasu at American, that's 85% of people buying tickets now, fits that demographic, is this the case of basically saying it's crazy to be selling fares to these people, but then have no further upsells attached to them?
I would agree. I'd say the big change with basic economy that they've made is, A, to get that cheap fare in the market more recognizable now, and B, to get the upsell, so it's about its ancillary benefit as well. Because given that people are going to be price conscious, less people are traveling and they're fighting in a smaller pool for share, they're trying everything they can to get the customer to hook them in and then to upsell. So the basic economy fare is the lead-in fare on OTAs, on online travel websites where you can make quick comparisons. I would agree that that's the case. What I would also say as a follow-up to what everyone else has been saying is, all the airlines seem to have matched their competitors, but there are some very subtle differences in the fine print and the T's and C's between them. So each of them are doing something slightly different. Some people are with the change fee. When you rebook, if your price goes up, you pay the difference, but if it goes down, you also get a voucher. So that's a different way of dealing with it than some other carriers. I think United say if it goes down, you don't get the price, but American will give you a voucher. So there's subtle differences in all of these things that the consumer needs to be wary of, which I doubt they will be on the face of it. Oops.
Is he muted, or is that just me?
He's muted.
I'm sorry, Jay. I apologize about that. I want to turn to you, Jay. But when we think about Americans, yeah, when we think about Americans' basic economy now, and if you're basically saying, hey, you know what, we don't have any business customers. We only have customers buying cheap fares now, and we need all the incremental revenue that we can get. We want to give them every opportunity. Instead of hate selling them and telling them, don't buy this product, what we want to do is, they're clearly still buying the product. If you're going to buy the product, let us provide you some value in return for some incremental revenue for all these other things that you can purchase and add on. To me, it looks like a more a la carte, typical, stereotypical unbundled fare that you'd find on a low-cost carrier. Is that your take on that as well?
Well, I want to comment on this. What is crazy is, given that there's so many customers who are infrequent, what's crazy is tossing at them a very complicated product. And that's what basic economy is. It's a very complicated product. And so if your whole mission is to come out and say, change fees are gone, your general consumer is going to think they're gone. And if the product that is going to be the most attractive to them because of the price point has change fees, well, that's just a stupid situation to create for yourself. And so I think that, I disagree with Gary in terms of, I think we're beginning to see, not beginning, this has been happening for some time. I think segmentation is a capricious and arbitrary way to using price restrictions, fare restrictions as a method of segregation is a capricious and silly way to segregate customer groups. And I think it's going to be on its way out because what's happened today is that, first off, there's been this, we're going through this giant reset of the airline industry in which everything is up for question in terms of everything's up for grabs in terms of the old way of doing business and how business will be done in the future. Plus we have society is far more transparent now. The ability for a bad decision to be magnified through social media is crazy in terms of the ability of one person to create a real spectacle for a carrier, for a company. And so I think that we're going to see a further degrading of these restrictions and in effect a more freedom for the customer. I think that the Southwest model is going to be the model that will become the prevailing model over the course of time, just because it's so easy and it's simple to understand.
That's an interesting point. Just while I've got you, Jay, I was just checking the Google last night. My historical memory was a little faded, but it was only a few years ago that American had bundled fares. Let me just see if I can get this slide up on the screen here. Here we go. We had the choice, the choice packages, choice essentials, choice plus. And it didn't necessarily run for a long time. This branding, but what's interesting, I know we made the flippant comment earlier about management changes. And we know that Russell Raja is certainly a rising star at American. Investors love him because he talks openly like Scott Kirby does. But Rick Ellison, who's now the president of Advantage, was, if I remember correctly, was the head of marketing at the time these bundled fares launched. And it's interesting. I'm not suggesting that there's a correlation there, a causation relationship there other than a correlation. But, Jay, are we going back? Are we moving back towards fare bundles like this?
What's funny about branded fares is that they're very popular in Europe now. The Lufthansa group and the Air France group now are using branded fares. They're really not. I was looking at American doesn't have. I think American has, is not using branded fares. Neither is United, and Delta kind of seems to have an approach. I think the approach used by the U.S. airlines is not optimum in terms of generating revenue. That a branded fare approach has been proven to generate more revenue and is easily understood by the customer. But again, technology plays a big part in this in terms of what they are capable of doing, what they're capable of delivering through their various pipelines, and perhaps that explains. But I am not a fan of the methods used by American, United, or Delta. I think the airline that's doing the best possible job of this is the airlines of the Lufthansa group in terms of how they present their fares.
Seth, tying all this back to loyalty, obviously we can, we've had some great discussions, certainly on the Loyalty Summit, in terms of, and even over the years about, the importance of the relationship between revenue management and loyalty, and they have to be team players. And I mean, the stereotype is that they hate each other. Revenue management on one side, loyalty on the other. Loyalty wants to release award seats, look after its members. Revenue management says no award seats. There's, they need to squeeze every dollar out of every seat possible, and they want to sell it. They don't want to give it away as an award. But the reality is the airlines with the most mature programs and organizational relationships between revenue management and loyalty are the most profitable and most successful, generally speaking. It's a mature relationship. We had the guys from Air Canada on a couple of weeks ago, and they said part of the success in designing the New Airplane program was that loyalty and revenue management were locked in the room together and basically couldn't come out until they solved the problem together. That's a great model. We could replicate it at other airlines. I fear at many airlines around the world we'll never see those people again. The local pizza delivery shop will probably run out of stock. But tying all this back to loyalty, when we think about the removal of the change fees for everything but basic economy, when we think about Americans' reversal of basic economy, and I don't want to prognosticate about whether other airlines are going to copy American on this or not, but it is a big policy change that elites are now recognized regardless of the fare that they purchase. How do you see generally loyalty impact of these changes that we're seeing? And also sort of that background context that part of the reason for this is there are no business travelers right now. And the only people flying are the people that are interested in buying the cheapest fare of the day, and they're generally not repeat customers and generally not members of the program. I know there's been some marketing. Vasu made a comment in the press the other day about, we now see basic economy as an entry level to bring people into the airline. I think I don't see any substance behind that comment. Other than acknowledging that the only people flying are the people buying cheapest fare of the day. If they have a good experience, hey, they might fly us again. I mean, but that's nothing to do with basic economy. That's just general business. Your take from a loyalty perspective on all of this?
Yeah, they might fly you again unless someone else is $5 cheaper next time, which, is what we've seen coming into this. Sort of going back to what I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think the impact to loyalty is probably as outsized as I think you've implied online leading up to this. And not that it doesn't matter at all, but I think that if we're talking about sort of the change in benefits, if you're a Mosaic with JetBlue or MVP 75K at Alaska, you already had this no change fee benefit, except on basic economy fares, and that's changed. Do you feel like your benefits have just gotten devalued? It's hard to say. Honestly, I've had Mosaic for a few years, and the change fee waiver thing has been huge for me and motivated me to keep that status. I'm not sure going into it now, knowing that there's no, if JetBlue hasn't matched, but if JetBlue were to match and say no change fees, I'm not sure how that would affect me. And even now with other airlines, being a little more competitive on that front, I'm not sure how that's going to affect me, but it may impair the loyalty. Carl in the chat here mentioned that he's Alaska top tier, but he's used to those change fees being waived. So does this really affect him, or does it make it, less valuable as a top tier status? To the American Airlines situation, Advantage members think one of the biggest differences is now they can get upgrades on these fares where they couldn't before. And I think that's more an admission by American Airlines that their number of people buying premium cabin fares has cratered, whether leisure or business traveler. Those people have disappeared from the market. And I think there's been a little bit of recovery for people who are like, well, I'm going to buy that because I want more space. And I feel like safer on the plane. If I'm in first class, I can board early, I can get out of the way, all those things. But I think sort of as the recovery comes around and the space issue stops being a question, but the recovery of business travel is still an issue. Are they really going to be focused on getting those upgrades? And you weren't getting. I'd argue that over the last 5-ish years, free upgrades for elites was a nice marketing ploy, but not really something that people could count on as a legitimate benefit. And so unless you really want your top tier folks, your EXPs and 1Ks and diamonds to be buying more basic economy fares, why would you do this? I feel like it's bad for the loyalty program in a lot of ways.
Are you on mute again?
You're still on mute, Dave.
Sorry, I had a screaming infant in the background. I assume you guys didn't probably want to hear what he had to say on the topic. But
that is useful as me.
No, he agrees with you, Seth. He agrees with everything you say. Just before I go to final thoughts on the topic, one of the things to note right now is it's not just about who's buying fares, but those people buying fares right now, nobody is buying fares in advance. Everybody is buying fares at the last minute because their plans are up in the air, all pun intended. I mean, you don't know if your destination's open. You don't know if the activities at your destination are open. You don't know if you can even travel. You don't know how you feel about traveling. There are so many ifs and buts right now. Nobody is buying fares in advance. Therefore, change fees are kind of irrelevant right now, aren't they? For all segments, whether you're a repeat customer, a non-repeat customer, a loyal member, a non-loyal member, change fees are irrelevant if you're buying an airfare the day before travel, right?
Yeah. But it's also, I guess, for them to shift the booking curve and to make people book earlier so that they have a better stake in the ground and see where they're going. Also, as airlines have cut capacity, it's better for them to know upfront which flights are filling up so that they can lay on some extras a few months in advance rather than everyone book at the last minute. What we're seeing is less flying, but fuller flights, which isn't that great in terms of the current situation.
And Dina, that makes sense to me, right? You want, from an operational perspective, we've got to wrap up in a minute, but from an operational perspective, you want people to book in advance. And if change is forcing people to wait to the last minute, remove that friction point, then people may book in advance. And that gives you as the airline operational flexibility. But these change waivers are all in place right now. So either the message isn't getting through to people that it's actually safe to book in advance right now, or regardless of those change waivers, people are still waiting to the last minute, which means I wonder, at least in the short term, maybe in the medium term, there'll be benefits, where the short term will fail to recognize those. Just as we finish up, final thoughts for everybody, Jay?
Well, I booked a trip to visit my son in LA. And the biggest concern I have is, whether a fire is going to impact our hiking trip up in the mountains. But, the airline part was the least troublesome of the whole booking process. Actually, the big commitment was the Airbnb in terms of booking the Airbnb for 3 nights in a cabin up in the Sierras was $550. And I can't change that. That is something that is lost if I have to cancel this trip. So that for me was the big decision, was, do I want to book that cabin? So the airline component is a small component oftentimes, especially with fares being where they're at, of total travel cost.
Gary, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to distinguish the current situation of COVID from the moves that the airlines have made here with respect to change fees, even if it's done in the context of moving a lot more quickly in a rapidly changing business environment, because change fee waivers exist even for basic economy fares, largely for the rest of the year, because customers are living in a very uncertain time and don't feel comfortable making purchase decisions, and they have to apply to basic economy because that's who the customers are and the fares that they're buying. Really, the changes that we're talking about are largely 2021 and beyond changes, and it's going to be quite some time before we know how they're really working out, because it's about keeping those, even when hopefully things begin to return to normal, including some modicum of business travel, even if business travel itself takes a little bit longer or changes somewhat as it comes back. When airlines are again able to sell more expensive tickets to less price-sensitive travelers, whether this is a worthwhile endeavor of getting this done. Although, as airlines have done so far with basic economy, I expect this not to be the final word on how things work, whether in terms of change fees and what fares apply and what destinations and routes, or how airlines treat their basic economy product. It'll be a continued tweaking towards the goal of generating additional incremental revenue from the customers that they have at the time. And there are, there have been mistakes and big mistakes made along the way.
Dinez, final thoughts?
I think not just with airlines, but also as Jay mentioned, looking at other industries. If you look at cruise and other leisure-based product, they're definitely looking longer term. So looking into 2021 and how they deal with customers trying to get their bookings in for those. So yes, it's the current situation at this point in time, but they've got a long-term play in place.
Terrific. And Seth, last but not least for you today.
I think the early conversations we had about how change fees were part of segmentation and part of differentiation made sense 20 or 30 years ago when that happened, and it's sort of just not the case anymore. I think that the types of tickets travelers have bought have shifted, and it's necessary now for airlines to rethink the model and how they're going to do that segmentation and make those distinctions between the passengers. And if you're ever looking for a time to make changes, you want to do it when the comps are going to be completely useless anyways. So why not pick 2020 into 2021 as the time to make the change? Because investors aren't going to really know if it's the fact that they dropped these fees or anything else that drives the new, bottom line number. So if you're going to make massive changes, now's the time to do it. And glad to see that some airlines decided maybe it's worth shifting how they're interpreting their passenger base and how they see the market.
Look, to sum up, thank you to our guests, Gary Leff, Seth Miller, Jay Sorensen, Dina Zach. Look, I don't want to speak for American Airlines or Vasu Raja on this, but, if part of the thinking is a case of, now's the time to say to ourselves, we can't take any customers for granted. If that's the thinking that's going on, I certainly think that airlines around the world could do a lot worse than apply the same thinking to their approach and their review of their own strategies and tactics. Thank you very much to our guests this week. What a fantastic topic. Always fun to have some controversial views, and we'll see how they all play out. Please all stay tuned at loyaltysummit.com and our LinkedIn page for more information on both our virtual summit and our physical summits coming up. Next webinar on the 29th, and hopefully our guests will be able to join us again in the future. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.